Hello, third graders. I hope you're having a good day today. I'm excited to talk more about the nervous system in the brain with you. All right, so last time we learned about the nervous system in our human body systems and senses unit. And this time we're going to learn more about the nervous system, and specifically, we're going to learn more about the brain. Your brain is very important, so we're going to learn more about it today. Here's some words that you will hear during the read aloud. Accurate means careful, free of mistakes or errors. Brain stem is the central trunk of the human brain that continues down to the spinal cord. Cerebellum is the part of the human brain that is found at the bottom and back of the skull and that helps control muscle activity. Cerebral cortex is the sheet of nerves that makes up the outer layer of the cerebrum of the human brain, and that is responsible for memory, attention, perceptual awareness, thought, language, and consciousness. And so that's part of the cerebrum. That's our next word. The dominant part of the human brain, found in the front of the skull, that has two sections and is responsible for regulating most thought processes and voluntary actions in the body. So the part of your brain you think with. Right? And dependent means controlled or determined by something else. Dependent on something. Hemispheres are halves of a sphere, halves of Earth. So the Earth is broken into the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. The United States is in the northern hemisphere, right? If you know anything about the globe, it is the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere are separated by a line, imaginary line around the Earth in the middle called the equator. But we also have hemispheres of the brain. The medulla is the lowest part of the brain stem, responsible for involuntary muscle movements. So, what have we already learned? We've been learning about different body systems. We've talked about the muscular system, the skeletal system, and now we're talking about the nervous system, and we've talked about how they are interconnected. They all work together to make our body work, right? They're not separate systems. They work together, or our bodies wouldn't do what they can do. All right. What does the phrase command center mean in reference to the nervous system? What's the command center? Well, if you remember, your brain is the command center that sends out signals and receives signals from your nerves throughout your body, through your spinal cord. So remember that cells are the building blocks of life. Everything that is living is made of cells. All right. Remember, we have conscious and unconscious decisions, like reflex actions are unconscious, right? Somebody throws something at your face, you're going to duck without even thinking about it, or you're at least going to blink if you see it coming. So unconscious things are things you do without thinking. Conscious are like if you decide to pick something up, right? You're making that decision, conscious decision to pick something up. And they're very similar to voluntary and involuntary, right? You have voluntary muscles that move because you've consciously decided to move your voluntary muscles. And then we have involuntary muscles, things that move like your heartbeats without you even telling it to do that. All right, here's our systems. At the bottom, you'll see our skeletal system, our muscular system, and our nervous system, which we are talking about today. Hi, I've got lots of fascinating facts to share with you today, so I'm hoping that my brain is in good working order. There's a lot to remember. Raise your hand if you have a brain. Whew, I'm glad all hands went up. Yes, of course you have a brain. All vertebrates have brains. Who remembers what else all vertebrates have? Right, backbones. You know that you have a backbone. You've been testing out those wonderful flexible spines that support your body and protect your spinal cords. Ooh, there's the brain. You've learned that your nervous system is a complex network with two essential organs, your spinal cord and your brain. Your spinal cord is connected to your brain by the brain stem, the central trunk of the brain. Your brain itself is very soft, but it is well protected by your cranium or brain case. This strong eggshell-shaped part of your skull is formed from 8 interlocking bones wedged together like the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. Remember, we talked about how when you're a baby, those jigsaw puzzle pieces aren't together yet, so you have soft spots, so you have to be more careful with babies' heads. Inside your skull, your brain floats in a clear liquid that cushions it and keeps it from banging against your skull. Did you know that your brain's in some liquid? Your brain is covered in grooves and folds resembling a huge walnut, about the size of a cantaloupe or a grapefruit. This jelly-like pinkish-gray blob has blood vessels running all through its wrinkled mass. They carry oxygen, water, and other important nutrients to the brain. Blood vessels carrying or circulating oxygen, water, and other important nutrients to the brain and throughout the body are a part of the circulatory system, which we haven't talked about very much, right? So the nervous system and the circulatory system are interconnected. Surprise, surprise. The brain, when fully grown, weighs about 3 pounds. That may seem pretty small and light for such a big body, but humans have larger brains than animals when compared with their body size. So even though the brains of elephants and whales are actually larger than human brains, their brains are smaller than ours compared with the enormous size of their bodies. There are 3 main sections of the brain, as you can see on this diagram. They are the brain stem, you see at the bottom, also known as the medulla, the cerebrum, you can see at the top, and then the cerebellum, you can see in the back at the bottom. Each part of the brain has an important function. Your brain stem, about as thick as your thumb, is approximately 3 inches long. It helps to relay messages between your brain and spinal cord. The bottom third of your brainstem, the part that blends into the top of your spinal cord, is called the medulla. The medulla is responsible for many of your body's involuntary or automatic muscle movements. The medulla makes sure that your lungs are receiving oxygen by controlling your breathing and making sure your heart is beating. The medulla helps you swallow and break down the food in your digestive system. So the nervous system and the digestive system are, say it with me, interconnected. The medulla controls your coughs and sneezes and hiccups, as well as your sleeping and dreaming, and it also controls the movement of your head and neck. It's got a big job to do, huh? The cerebrum is the largest part of your brain. That's the one at the top of this diagram, filling the whole upper part of your skull. Language, memory, thoughts, sensations, and decision-making are housed in your cerebrum. Your cerebrum is the thinking brain, and the part of the cerebrum that does most of the thinking is called the cerebral cortex. Your cortex is the deeply wrinkled outer surface of the cerebrum. The more that it is used, the thicker it becomes. In other words, people who use their brains to think a lot develop thicker cortexes. Do you think your cortex is getting any thicker? It is. You're learning a lot each day. You guys probably have really thick cortexes. That would be a really good compliment to give someone. I'm going to start doing that. Wow, you must have such a thick cortex. Instead of saying, you're so smart, I think I'll start saying, you have such a thick cortex. Let's look more closely at the cerebrum. The cerebrum is divided into two halves or hemispheres. So you can see the left and the right, they're different colors. All right, the axis of the brain would be the middle part, right? Remember, an axis goes through the center of an object, dividing it into two parts or hemispheres. The two hemispheres of the brain, the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, are linked to one another by thick nerve fibers. Interestingly, the nerves that connect your cerebrum to the rest of your body cross over the opposite side as they enter your brain. This means that each hemisphere largely controls the muscles of the opposite side of the brain, opposite side of the body. So the left side of your cerebrum controls muscles on the right side of your body, and the right side of your cerebrum controls muscles on the left side of your body. How interesting is it that we were made that way? One hemisphere is usually more developed than another in most people. If you use the right side of your brain more, that is, you kick with your right foot and you hold your pencil in your right hand, the left hemisphere is dominant or in control. It is the left hemisphere that is mostly associated with language, math, and reading. If, however, you use the left side of your body more, that is, you kick with your left foot and you hold your pencil in your left hand, that would be me, I'm left-handed, the right hemisphere is dominant. The right hemisphere is mostly associated with imagination, music, and shapes. Miss Hill does have a very big imagination. The third part of the brain, in addition to the brainstem and the cerebrum, is called the cerebellum, meaning little brain. So you can see in the small diagram in the middle of this picture, we have the cerebellum at the bottom of our brain, right there. Tucked under your cerebrum in the back of your brain, your cerebellum resembles your cerebrum with two hemispheres of its own. Your cerebellum is the control center for balance and coordination. It is constantly adjusting the way your body moves. As you practice any physical activity such as dancing, your cerebellum receives messages about your body's actions and positions. So when Cadence goes to her dance class, she is using her cerebellum a lot. It commands back to your muscles, adjusting your movements. As your cerebellum gradually becomes more accurate in its corrections, you begin to notice improvements in your dancing or whatever activity you are trying to perfect. For example, if you have learned to ride a bike, chances are you didn't master it all at once. It took practice. Your cerebellum was in charge of your balance and coordination, making small adjustments with each improvement until you could pedal quickly and furiously on your own without even thinking about it. It's as easy as riding a bike. Let's try an experiment to demonstrate what the cerebellum does. Close your eyes and reach your arms out to your sides so your body makes the shape of a T. Slowly bring your arms forward, touching the fingertips together. You may open your eyes now. Was that easy for you? Your cerebellum coordinated your movements for you. If you damaged your cerebellum, you would not be able to do this simple exercise. No matter how hard you tried, your hands would jerk around without any control. So your cerebellum helps control your hands. I hope you tried that. Now let's put all the parts of your brain together. Look at this picture of the brain. See if you can identify the three parts: the brainstem, the cerebrum, and the cerebellum. I'm going to ask you 3 riddles to test your knowledge and see how well your brain is working. Ready? I am the largest part of the brain. Divided into 2 hemispheres, I am sometimes called the thinking brain. What am I? Remember, the largest part of your brain is the cerebrum. I am only 3 inches long, but without me, the spinal cord would not be connected to the brain. One of my parts is called the medulla. What am I? That's right, the brainstem. I look a lot like the cerebrum with two hemispheres of my own, but I am much smaller. Without me, you would not be able to balance on one leg. What am I? That's right, the cerebellum. I think, yeah, cerebellum. Your brain is not very big, and yet it is more powerful than the strongest computer ever created. All other systems of the body are dependent upon this complex 3-pound organ that lives inside your skull. Your brain is the center of your memory, thoughts, and feelings. Your brain is in command of your whole body. When your brain stops working, the rest of your body will stop working as well. It's important. Well, I think I remembered everything I wanted to tell you today. Next time, we'll look inside your skull some more to see what else is tucked away within those bones in addition to the brain. What can you predict that we'll talk about next time? It's also inside your skull. See you then. Is your skull one big bone? No, it is actually 8 interlocking bones wedged together like a puzzle. And they didn't start wedged together, right, when you were a baby. What is another word for skull? Your cranium. There's a board game called Cranium. That's what it makes me think of. Which vital organ does the skull encase? What's inside your skull that's so important? Your brain. Is the brain the only thing within the skull? Is there anything else in there? So it's just the brain and nothing else. No, remember the brain is actually floating in a clear liquid that cushions it and keeps it from banging against the skull. What are the 3 sections of the brain? The brainstem, the lower part, which is also called the medulla, the cerebrum, and the cerebellum. What is the medulla or lower part of the brainstem responsible for controlling? It's responsible for controlling unconscious reflex actions, right? Things that you're not thinking about. Your reflexes. What are some examples of what the medulla controls? Your breathing, heartbeat, sneezing, things that you don't get to decide that you're doing it, right? Your body just does it. That's the medulla. What is the cerebrum responsible for controlling and managing? Language, memory, thought, sensations, and decision making, right? It's the thinking part of your brain. And which part of the cerebrum does the most thinking? It is the cerebral cortex. What happens to the cerebral cortex if it is used more, right? It gets thicker. It becomes thicker over time. You must have a very thick cerebral cortex. Are the other systems dependent or independent of the brain? Dependent on the brain or independent of the brain? If you remember, they're dependent on, right? They have to work together. The brain and the nervous system are the command center of the whole body. If the brain stops working, the human body stops working. You cannot live without a brain or with a brain that's not working. Why is it important to wear a helmet when you play sports or ride a bike? Be sure to name at least 2 parts of the brain in your answer. Why is that important? In earlier read-alouds, you learned that the skull and the ribs are 2 of the 3 axal bones in your body. Remember, the axal bones are your middle bones, your skull, your ribs, and your spine, right? That are in the middle of your body. Compare and contrast the vital organs that these 2 important axal bones are protecting. So what is similar and what is different about what the skull and the ribs are protecting? All right, during the read aloud, you saw this text feature right here. This is a blank of the brain. What text feature is that? And how does this text feature help you understand what we learned in the read aloud? How does it help us? Our word for today is hemispheres. In the read aloud you heard, the cerebrum is divided into two halves or hemispheres. Say the word hemispheres with me. Hemispheres. Hemispheres are halves of a sphere or sphere-like object, such as halves of Earth or halves of the cerebrum. If you looked at the picture of the United States is located in the northern hemisphere, which is the northern half of Earth, when separated horizontally at the equator into the northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere. All right. So when you separate a sphere in half, you make it into hemispheres. All right. Good job, guys. I hope you enjoyed learning more about the brain. You've been working hard and using your brain.